Hello students, it's Dr. Yu. In this lecture, we're going to talk about virtual presentations. Specifically, we're going to focus on camera work. So let's get to it. Virtual presentations differ from the face-to-face context. You can see here, the face-to-face context is very straightforward. You just have yourself, the audience, and that's it. There's nothing in between you. There's nothing to mediate between you and the audience other than air molecules in space. Now, if I was giving a face-to-face presentation, you might, let's say, sneak in a camera and a microphone. But unless I am speaking directly to it, more than likely, I'm just going to interact directly with the audience. And this is just me being overheard. So then you would just be recording me talking to a live audience, and there's that. But let's say we're talking about a broadcasting context. In a broadcasting context, here's how communication works. So you have yourself, and then you talk to directly the camera and the microphone. And then what you say to the camera and microphone gets projected onto a TV screen, and presumably millions or thousands or hundreds of TV screens, and then your audience receives it. And it's a very one-way interaction. So here's the thing. Virtual presenting has some of the features of face-to-face presenting, but it also has this aspect of broadcasting. So a lot of what good virtual presenting is actually good practice for broadcasting. So if you have a broadcast journalism degree or training, a lot of those things that you learn there apply here. But a Zoom presentation or a virtual presentation isn't exactly broadcasting, because you can notice here, if I'm the news reporter, I go to the camera and microphone, gets projected on the screen, audience talks, but there's no two-way here. And we know that virtual meetings work that way. So here, let's account for what actual virtual presenting is. It's you talking into a camera and microphone. That camera and microphone gets projected onto a screen. And then each individual, and that's why there are these boxes here, each individual has their own camera or has their own screen that they're looking at and their own screen. So this person has a screen, that person has a screen, that person has a screen, and each of their screens might be a little bit different depending on their internet connection and so forth. But then we're not done, because each audience member also has their own camera and mic, and he has his own camera and mic, and she has her own camera and mic. And then I have a screen, and I have one camera, and I have one mic. And when you're presenting on Zoom, you have to speak into this camera and mic to your audience, but then you also have to pay attention to feedback from your audience through each of their own cameras and mics onto your screen, and pay attention to both. So that's hard, because you have a camera and a mic that's mediating between you and the screen. So you have to make sure that your camera is good and that your mic is good, because what they're going to see on the screen is whatever is mediated through here. I know this is looking really messy. And then, as a side note, if you're delivering your speech in a dual delivery context, not only do you have to be properly mediated through a camera and mic to ensure that whoever is zooming in or virtualing in, that they can see you, you also have to pay attention to a screen, because that's your feedback from the audience there. But then to add to it, you also have a face-to-face audience that you have to pay attention to, and so you have to make sure you're conveying things to them very well, and you're also paying attention to them too. So welcome to dual delivery, if you have to do that. Yeah, it's a lot of things to keep track of. So there are three aspects of virtual presenting that will apply regardless of what context you're doing, whether it's a broadcasting context and you're broadcasting for a YouTube video or such, or if it's a virtual presentation context where you're giving a virtual presentation 100% through Zoom or Teams or whichever platform, or if it's a dual delivery context where you have some people present and then some people online. Those three aspects are camera, sound, and screen. In this lecture, we're going to focus 100% on camera. So, camera has three aspects. Number one, there's lighting, there's distance, and there's angle. And in this next part, we're going to focus on the lighting, the distance, and angle aspects to ensure that you look good on camera, because camera is the eyes of the audience. If what you put in front of the camera isn't very good, well, that's what they're going to see. So we have to make sure that our lighting, our distance, and our angle are good for camera work. So let's start with lighting first. There's a general problem with lighting, and it's just basic science. We call it the lighting problem. Whenever you shine light on anything, it creates a shadow behind whatever it is you cast the light upon. And then there's different kinds of shadows, like there's degrees of shadow. So like the core shadow, the shadow cone, and the cast shadow. So the core shadow is what's on the object. The shadow cone, or like this aspect, is what's in between. And then the cast shadow is what appears on the wall. So the problem is when you're on Zoom and you're working with light, you don't want to look all shadowy. So what professional photographers do, for example, to deal with this, is they do setups like 3-point lighting and 4-point lighting setups, where they'll have the camera here, and then they'll have a key light. And the key light's probably the harshest light, and it's going to come from one angle. Okay, and this is going to be like a harsher type light, because that's going to be the majority of the light. But to account for all the shadows that are going to be cast here, they have another light called the fill light, and the fill light's like a softer light to just make up for whatever shadows are going to cast there. And then some add a backlight, and this is the 3-point lighting setup, where to give some more depth and dimension to the person, they have a light coming from the back as well. And then some would have a 4th light going towards the wall here, and that's your 4-point lighting setup. Now, I'm not saying that you need to have a photography studio set up in your house to do Zoom presenting. But what I'm showing you is the lighting problem is a problem, and this is how professional photographers at least try to deal with it. But there are some things that you can do when you are presenting on Zoom to deal with the lighting problem. My first and favorite thing is to get a ring light. So you can get these on Amazon for about $20 for the stand and the light, and then some are even cheaper than that. The ring light is going to be a front source of light that's going to come towards your face. So the biggest thing that you need when you do virtual presenting is you got to have a front source of light, so the light is coming from the front and not from the back or from the side. So that way you don't have shadows on your face when you're presenting. But also, the other sources of light you might have in your room, for example, is your window light. So your window light might also provide light from a specific direction depending on your setup. But let's say the window light is coming from your side, then you need to not have a front light coming from the other side, because otherwise you're going to have shadows on this side if the window's coming this way. And then you also have your overhead lights, and those can be lamps or those can be lights from the ceiling. And those are going to cast light from the top down. And generally those don't create a lot of shadows depending on the structure of your face, but then you still want to make sure that any shadow that is casted is made up for with a ring light or some opposite direction light that's coming. So you can see here like the ring light, in this case he has light coming from the side here from the windows. The ring light's going to cut his side of the face, and then I think he has an overhead light as well. And so that's going to help make up for any shadows that'll be cast on his face. So you can see an example of bad lighting here. So here you have somebody in their room. You can tell that this is the back source of light because he's shadowed here. And so you can see why this looks really bad. And then he has a little bit of light coming from his computer, but it's not very good. And he's just very dark and shadowy. This is not what we want to look like when we're on Zoom. Instead, he has a front source of light now. You see how he looks much more lit up. He looks like he is the focus of the frame. And so the frame is whatever's captured within the camera here. He's the focus of it. This looks much better. Now, lighting is just one aspect to virtual presenting. The second aspect is distance. When we're talking about camera work, so camera, we have lighting, distance, and angle. As far as camera work goes, distance is how far you are from the camera and what the focus of the camera is. So here's an example of a movie. I believe this is Benjamin Button, if I remember right, with Brad Pitt. Whenever you're on camera, there's always going to be two aspects to the shot. There's going to be something called the foreground. So notice here how the camera is focused on the foreground. Like Brad Pitt and his music and his piano, it's clear, it's crisp, it takes up most of the shot here. And this is what we're going to pay attention to. And then you have the background, and the background is what fades away. It's in the background, but we kind of see it's going on, but the focus of this shot is on Brad and his piano. So foreground and background. Now, when establishing your foreground, you want to make sure that you're about arm's length away from the camera. So you can see right now, you can see the tip of my fingers. I am arm's length away from the camera. That way I occupy the majority of the screen. Now, as I shoot this video, I am shooting on a half screen, so naturally I take up most of it. But even if I extend it out, I'm going to take up most of the screen because I'm not too far and I'm not too close to the camera. You're not so close where you're like this, but you're not so far where you're just really, really far back and you're like this tiny figure in the video. So here's an example of a good foreground. Notice how he takes up so much of the camera. So he gets all the attention. So generally, I would say elbows up is a good look to have. Also notice that he's not cut off at the head. Sometimes people, they are not far enough to where they get cut off and you only see half their head. Here, he takes up most of the screen and it looks really good. Now, as far as backgrounds go, you have two choices for backgrounds. You have natural backgrounds, which are the actual layout of your room. So you see a nice little layout of a background here, which is natural, well lit. She's well lit, looks nice. But then you have virtual backgrounds. And so virtual backgrounds are all the fake backgrounds that you can download for Zoom that make it look like you're in different places at different times and so forth. My preference is this. I always prefer a natural background over a virtual background just because natural backgrounds don't... The problem with virtual backgrounds is you get cut off. Like if you notice, like there's the Blue Man Group effect where half of your face is missing. And they can get kind of distracting too if there's motion in the background because I'm looking at you, but I'm just watching the palm trees like with the wind in the background. So I recommend if you can have a nice natural setup to use that instead. And what you should be thinking about with your natural setup is how can I add credibility to myself with my background? Using books, maybe using art, using things that would be associated with the kind of image that I would want to convey to my audience. If you can't do a natural background, I'd much rather have a blank wall before I go to virtual backgrounds personally. But if you have to do a virtual background, pick something that's benign, that's not going to be distracting, and something that you know your camera can handle without cutting out parts of your body. And if you do the natural background, I recommend following a principle. I call it the house guest principle. When you do Zoom, or whenever you are doing a virtual conference from home, you are inviting everyone you're talking to into your house. You're giving them a peek of what's inside your house. So, if you're on a Zoom meeting with two of your directors from your company, where is the first place you would want them to go if they were coming to your house? And so you got to ask these questions. The room that I'm doing this Zoom from, is it appropriate for the relationship? So, for example, if this is a very important business meeting, is Zooming with my bed in the background in my bedroom, would that be appropriate for our relationship? If I invited directors into my house for a meeting, would I say, okay, everyone, let's go to my bedroom? No, I don't think that would be appropriate. So I don't recommend Zooming from your bedroom unless you're in some dire circumstance where that is the only place. Then in that case, I would either do a blank wall, try to see if you can orient your materials to be a blank wall so your bed isn't showing. Or in that case, that's when I would say do a virtual background. But then also, does it enhance my credibility? Okay, so I won't bring it into my bedroom, but I'll take them to my basement where I have my entire Pokemon collection on display. Okay, does your entire Pokemon collection on display enhance your credibility with this audience? I don't know. I mean, it makes you, I guess it humbles you and whatnot, but I don't know if that's what you're going for in that particular meeting or in that context. So in that case, I would rather pick like an office or like a study room or a living room that maybe shows some sophistication or some facts, something that shows that you read, or at least implies that you might read, something that would be good for your credibility overall. And then you also have to ask, is this place practical for virtual presenting? So when we say practical for virtual presenting, is it soundproof? Or at the very least, is it not a place with heavy traffic? Like, am I going to see your roommate walking to and from the refrigerator every time, every 5 minutes? Is it a good visual display? Is it clean? So these are things where is it practical for lighting purposes? If it's a really dark room and there's no light and you can't get a ring light and you're going to look shadowy, probably not good, not practical for virtual presenting. So you have to think about all three of these things. What room or what location will strike the balance of being appropriate for the relationship? So if these people literally came to my house, where would I want to take them? Where would I not take them? Will it enhance my credibility at all? You definitely want something that's going to make you look credible. And is it actually practical for virtual presenting given the lighting, the sound, and what might be going on in the background? There's also a third option. Microsoft Teams has this, and this is one reason I like Teams. You can have the option of blurring your background. This might count as a virtual background, but basically it blurs everything behind you, so that way you stay the focus. It seems to work pretty well. I've used it before, but that would be an option. Now, you might recognize this guy. There was a YouTube video that came out in March, I believe, March or April, when the pandemic first started. And you might recognize him from this video. Let's see if it plays. Okay, so maybe it won't play on. Let me see if I can get it to get going here. Oh, for some reason it's not playing right now. Oh, here we go. Great.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean?
And it's okay if it's on mute right now. So he's trying to talk, and then you remember his daughter comes in. Okay, so yeah, there's a distraction here, and he's trying to give the answer to the question, then more things happen, and then of course you remember this part. You might have seen this video before, and he's on live news right now, and yeah, probably not fun, and now he's a little flustered of what's going on. But it'll all get fixed. It'll all get fixed. And yeah, close the door, of course. Okay. I'm sure we've all had this moment by now where something like this may have happened to us or could have happened to us, or we're always worried that something like this could occur. And maybe you live in a house of 5 people and you're working from home and you have kids and you have a dog and all these things. So let's pretend we are this guy. What are some ways we could handle a situation like this if it occurs? So let me go into 3 solutions. There are 3 things you can do if you are virtually presenting, where if something happens in your background that you don't plan for, that you can solve. Your first option, so if let's say your kids come running into your room, your first option is to fake it. When you fake it, you pretend as if it's not happening. So you just kind of, kids come into your room real fast, you just kind of pretend they're not there, and then just hopefully when you fake it enough, if you fake it enough, they realize you're in the meeting and then they leave. Or let's say your roommate walks in real fast and they didn't realize you're in a meeting and then they close the door. Okay, just fake it. Just pretend it's not happening, that it's a solution, that's something that's going to go away on its own, and you see it happening and you're just trying to keep going, keep your composure, and eventually it just kind of goes away. Okay, so for very temporary, quick things that you don't think are going to last a long time, I think faking it is a good idea. But let's say you can't fake it anymore. Like, this isn't a thing that's going to go away. Your dog came in the room, and now your dog is, like, barking at you, or is, like, trying to sniff your lap, and all those things. Okay, then you can try to fix it. In this case, what he can do is he can just say, hang on a second, and take his kids, escort them out the room, close the door, and then he fixed it. Or if your dog is coming in the room, say, hang on, give me 1 second, and then just escort them out the room, close the door. All right, now it's fixed. So whenever you fix it, you're taking a timeout to just fix whatever it is going on, and then you come back to the meeting. But your third option, if you think this is a good situation where this can occur, is you can feature it. So the kids come in. Perhaps what you do is just acknowledge your kids are in the room and feature it. Oh, by the way, these are my 2 kids. You know, say hi, Chris, say hi, Jackie, you know, that kind of thing. Or if your dog comes in, you know, your dog comes in, maybe you hold up your dog for a second and say, oh, everyone, by the way, this is my companion, John, you know, or Johnny Dog, I don't know, whatever his name is, you know, say hi, blah, 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 blah. Okay, feature him for a second, makes you look human, makes you look like a nice person, you have a dog, okay, and maybe you keep the dog there, or maybe you fix it, do a combination, fix him, take it outside, and close the door. So your options are fake it, fix it, or feature it. It just depends on the situation. There isn't a universal, this always works kind of thing. But depending on the situation, think about these 3 options. Lastly, let's talk about angle. So as far as camera work goes, we have lighting, and that's going to be the control of light, making sure you're not looking shadowy. Distance, making sure you're occupying enough of the frame, arm's length. Now we have angle. So this is a bad camera angle. Even though he takes up most of the frame, you can see that the audience is looking at the ceiling. I feel like this guy is putting me to bed. He's going to tell me a bedtime story or something. So we don't want an angle like this where we're seeing a lot of ceiling and we're just on the ground. Obviously, he's using like a tablet or something to talk to us. What we also don't want is this, where he's too high and we're looking up the person's nose. So you can see here that when he talks to us, he's looking down at us. Like this is like he's looking down at us and we're looking up at him. This is not good. We don't want to feel like we're being talked down to when we're talking to somebody or somebody's like talking down to us. And we don't want to feel like we're talking like somebody looking up like that. Plus, we're kind of looking up his nostrils and that can be gross. So we definitely do not want an angle like this. This is the camera is too low. It's not at eye level. And this is not a good look. The other bad look, not good, is if the camera is too high. Okay, so here, like you're like a little child and you're like looking up at us, and that's not good. That gives the audience way too much power to just kind of be like, no, child, no. Okay? I've seen some people where they have their camera on top of something, and then they are like looking up at it. That's not good. The other problem with this too, by the way, is if he were to actually look down at the camera, if you have sort of like a double chin or anything that you don't want really exposed like that, that's not going to look very good. So here's what we want. It's called the coffee date principle. We want the camera at eye level, meaning the camera itself is at the same level as if you were talking to someone on a date or like on a coffee date. So you have to imagine your computer is like a face. The human eyes are the camera. So you want the eyes to be at the level of your eyes. And then the screen is like the mouth and the chin. Now, you got to raise your camera then high enough to where the camera is at eye level with yours. So it's not the camera's down here and you're looking, oh, I'm looking at the camera. No, that's too low. You're looking down at the camera. It's got to be at the same level. The eyes like straight line. I'm looking straight forward at the camera and I can see everything. I can see the camera. I'm not looking up. I'm not looking down. I'm just straight. My chin, if I do the L, my chin is at 90 degrees right now. And I can look directly at the camera and have that personal connection with whoever it is that I'm talking to. The other thing too, this is especially true with laptops. When we say the camera is at eye level, so let me just clear this real fast here. Okay. When I say the camera is at eye level, so let's say this is a laptop. You want it so that your laptop is at 90 degrees. So this is the top, and so I'm trying to draw with a trackpad. So, okay, this is the top. The laptop is at 90 degrees. So that means the camera should be straight, the screen should be straight. What you don't want is this, like this is my laptop and then this is the camera, because this is gonna still face up like this, and that's not eye level. So then what that's gonna do is I'm gonna be looking down and I'm gonna get tons of ceiling. The audience is gonna be looking up at the ceiling and you're gonna end up with one of those weird angles where we're looking up your nostrils or we're looking at your ceiling, and that's not good. You want it to be so that the camera, the laptop is at 90-degree angle, and the camera is high enough to be at the eye level of you. So that way your chin is straight, you're not looking down, not looking up, and then you have that perfect presence on the camera. Now, you might be asking, well, how do I do that? How do I get my camera to be eye level? Because I would have to stack him and blah, blah, blah. Yes. So there's a couple things you can do. First, you can buy stands for laptops and computers that raise them to eye level. So you can go on Amazon and you can find all kinds of laptop stands that will raise your laptop high enough so that the camera part, and remember, all you need is the camera part to be at eye level. You don't need the keyboard to be eye level, just the camera part. And you can raise your laptop to be at that level. Secondly, if you don't want to buy a stand, and stands are pretty cheap, but let's just say you can't, or it hasn't came in the mail yet, books, the classic simple free solution, stack some books under your laptop. Or if you have a monitor, put them under your monitor. And there are also monitor stands, by the way. So if you're using a desktop like an iMac or just a regular desktop, you can get desk monitor stands that do the same thing as laptop stands. But you can always put them under books. That's also an option. Your third option too, if this is available to you, I know a lot of people are into standing desks nowadays. If you put your computer on a standing desk and you stand, it actually can be eye level, and that can actually work quite well. I mean, if you don't mind standing for an entire meeting, and just, make sure you don't shuffle while you're talking on camera. That can work just fine too. So those of you who are into standing desks and all that, just make sure your iMac or whatever computer you have is at eye level, and that'll work just fine. Just as long as you don't mind standing. That's the key thing. So overall, those are virtual presentations. And in the second part, we'll talk about sound, and we'll see you then.